I really wanted to title this video Organized Crime Group, the U.S. Democratic Party, or the Democrats' Fight Against Democracy. In the state of Arizona, according to all preliminary data, the Republican Kari Lake was supposed to become the next governor. But at the last moment, sounds familiar, right? A Democrat pulled ahead, and voters who wanted to vote at several polling stations, where mostly Republicans live, were unable to vote for a whole range of different technical reasons.
And John Solomon from Just the News shared this important report. He said, "Today the FBI is expanding its criminal investigation into alleged election violations about a month after the Bureau first announced it was investigating other issues there in Faniland, Fulton County, Georgia. They seized a bunch of 2020 ballots there, and Fulton is their largest county, which is now run by Fani Willis. Now the subpoena comes 5 years after the Arizona State Senate conducted a lengthy investigation into the events of 2020 and concluded that there were significant violations. At that time, an FBI agent told a Georgia court that they, quote, identified serious violations in the vote counting in Georgia's largest urban area after 2020 and are investigating whether these failures were intentional attempts to violate election law."
The Democrats came up with a way to not count Republican votes. They printed ballots in a size that these very machines weren't calibrated for. The machines didn't accept those ballots. And this happened to thousands of Republicans.
In 2022, the machines in Maricopa County were programmed to fail, according to Rasmussen reports. According to him, they were caught on video secretly testing them to make sure they would eventually fail. Then, once the test became accurate, in other words, once they confirmed that everything would break, they sent the machines to the polling centers and set them up there, where they eventually did fail. The video captured election fraud that didn't actually happen. Here is the time code. He refers to a lot of things here, and I had another post about this from Rasmussen, and this is possibly one of those affidavits that caused so much concern. He said, "The new FBI is reportedly investigating one of the most scandalous affidavits about election fraud ever filed. And it sounds like this. Keep this redacted copy in your files because this could really escalate." This is the sworn statement from 2021 from the resort. And there's no name here, but it's from Rasmussen Reports on X. This is sworn testimony. Someone is saying, "This is what I saw, and this is what I think happened." He writes, "I noticed there was a sign hanging there. They were hiring people to work for $21 an hour. I asked the resort workers about it, and they told me they were hiring people for voter registration. While I was there, I watched people constantly going in and out of the ballrooms, carrying boxes back and forth. The ballrooms were filled with computers, workers, and boxes with voter information. And then one day there was a Federal Express package for them at the front desk, and I delivered it to the ballroom. There was no one at the door, so I went in to find someone. When I entered the ballroom with the package, I saw ballots stacked in boxes. The whole room was filled with them. Then some worker came up to me, and I was told that I wasn't allowed to be there. I told them I had brought them a package. They took the package and said, 'Get out of here.' These were the same boxes they kept bringing in and taking out. Later, I found out that they were hiring workers from Arizona to go to Georgia and work there." Oh! Woo! It's all connected. They started here, and then they moved to Georgia. Also, a certain group was working at odd hours, coming in early and parking wherever they wanted without following any rules. I went to and asked him about this group and what was going on, but he ignored me. I asked some of the resort workers about them, and they answered with silence. No one wanted to talk or get involved. Question: what were your feelings based on these observations? He said, "Well, based on my investigative experience and what I knew about the presidential election, I believe it was election fraud and illegal ballot harvesting, which is against the law. What else did you do?" I called Congresswoman Debbie Lesko. She is the congresswoman from Surprise, Arizona. I wanted to give her this information. I spoke to a staff member who wasn't interested in what I was saying, because of course, and the staff member told me that the congresswoman or someone else would get in touch with me, but they never did. Then I called Redacted because I knew he was working on the elections in Georgia, and I gave him the information I had. Question: you said that, based on your experience in investigations, you believe this was illegal ballot harvesting and election fraud. Could you tell us, have you ever testified in court? Yes. And have you ever appeared in court as an expert witness? Yes. About how many times? I have testified hundreds of times. As an expert? As an expert witness, I have testified regarding federal, state, and municipal elections, as well as an expert in police criminal investigations. So we have redacted affidavits, a bunch of materials that will hopefully be published soon. But unfortunately for us, this is a criminal investigation, and these things remain under the cover of night until we eventually get answers to it. So here's some more from the video. Kari Lake's campaign shared this in 2023. We've been trying to figure this out for years, and again he says, a video recording of election fraud that didn't fail.
A huge secret organization was working to drop fake ballots in the right places and create a last-minute advantage for the already confused Joe Biden. And millions, if not billions, were spent to steal the election from Donald Trump. In fact, we're actually lucky to have you, gentlemen. If that hadn't happened, then Trump wouldn't have had 4 years to think through a plan, assemble a team, and lay out in detail all the steps necessary to bring America back to the path set by the founding fathers of this great country, to the path charted by Thomas Paine, which laid the foundation for the greatest leap of our civilization toward improving life, if not for everyone, then for the majority of the population of the countries that followed this path, and not the other path, which, well, a little later was, so to speak, introduced and shown to the world by Karl Marx. The Democrats you see at dozens of polling stations were putting non-standard paper into the counting machines, and the machine would show "Stop Jam Document." Well, just see for yourself.
So putting some stuff into the machine. So we put some things into the machine. We'll see how this other guy comes out right here. Okay, put that in there. Paper jam. Let's see what happens. Oh, it didn't work. Oh no, the machine broke. Perfect. That's exactly what they need. Let's see what's next for him. Here's another. Let's put it here. Will it work? No, spit it back out. Oh no, perfect. Everything is working flawlessly. They don't want people's ballots to be counted on election day. All of this. It worked. Democrats voted overwhelmingly by mail, and here you can see them adjusting something, and another one is having trouble. Hey, let me help you with that. No, it was all just a joke. So this goes on, there will be a lot of lawsuits. There have already been a lot of lawsuits. We had an entire trial about this case. This wasn't done in secret. These weren't tests. This wasn't misconduct, as someone said. And I can't wait for this case to continue. There were several checklists, and a lot wasn't tested. This is the same scheme and practice we've already seen. Maricopa County did not follow the law. They caused a massive failure and chaos on election day, and we went through it.
From my point of view, the Democratic Party of the United States is simply a criminal organization like a Mexican cartel, which just has to act more carefully than a cartel. As I already told you, the state of Arizona, Maricopa County. County means county. Let's say a county. And each state consists of a number of such counties, which I just told you about. It was directly connected. That's exactly what we're talking about. That people were sent there from here. They trained them here and sent them there. By deception and fraud with the state of Georgia, county. Fulton County. Where are the documents? They were arrested 2 weeks ago. Then suddenly the FBI showed up there to search with a warrant from Maricopa, from the so-called grand jury, from the court, where you remember Fani Willis was handling cases against Trump and almost put him in jail. But along the way, it turned out that she had hired her lover, and together they were spending. In our terms, they were embezzling money, the money allocated specifically for the attempt to charge Trump. We were very lucky. Just like the Russian intelligence generals embezzled money, the money allocated for bribing Ukrainian generals right before the invasion so that they would lay down their arms when Russia entered Ukraine, but the money never reached the Ukrainian generals. Because in Russia, they wrote something like $2 billion, I don't know, maybe rubles, no. Rubles aren't that much money, $2 billion. And the Ukrainian command didn't betray the motherland. But if they had spent $2 billion, they would have. Of course, there weren't billions in Fulton County, but they were given several million to save, or so that they would betray democracy. Now documents have been found where the White House, breaking all American laws, made an offer to Fani, her office. Here, bribes are not given directly. Money is transferred, cashless. Figure out yourself how to steal them. Either 15 million or 18 million. They'll talk about it in the video, I can't remember right now, so that she could take down Trump. And then, how you're going to take that money out for your own needs, for little things, that's your business. Just like she took it out through her lover. Of course he was married. Everyone around knew. It seems that even his wife knew too. That kind of money comes into your hands, of course, you'd even give up your husband. What can you do if the bosses steal? Everyone around was stealing, of course, little by little. So in Fulton County, Fani got caught. And the court threw her out of the case. That is, they banned her to participate in this case, and the defendant is Trump and his accomplices. Trump wasn't the only one there. Many others were too. They filed a lawsuit against Fani, again, not against her personally, against her office, to recover their expenses. They spent money on lawyers, on court cases, on all sorts of research, investigations. Basically, they sent them the bill, $16.8 million.
Приблизительно столько, сколько ей...
The White House promised to send it if she starts prosecuting Trump. Fani turned to the management. She said, I was representing the state, so you should pay. The people in the county got up in arms, and the story started to unfold.
Tonight, for the first time, Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis will speak. She is answering questions about possible expenses of $17 million related to the 2020 election case against President Trump and his allies. So defense attorneys want the prosecution to reimburse their expenses, citing a new state law, after they spent millions of dollars on the case, which is now dismissed. This is a legal precedent, and there is a debate about who should pay and who will cover these expenses. Here is what the district attorney said today.
Who will pay if these lawyers receive requested fees?
The law is unconstitutional, and I think that will be proven in court.
Who will return this money? They asked Fani. This law does not comply with our Constitution, answered the beautiful Fani.
All right, so here we go. Fulton County Judge. So here's the thing. Fulton County Judge Scott McAfee will decide whether this case falls under the new law and how much, if anything, will be paid. There has been no decision yet, but we'll let you know if anything changes.
According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, Fani Willis says that Trump's lawyers' demand for payment would consume the entire available budget. Fani Willis says that she shouldn't have to pay nearly $17 million in legal fees to President Donald Trump and his allies after her prosecution against them failed. In the document, which also criticized the new Georgia law that allows them to bill for these expenses. In her statement, she called it an amount that will completely drain her department's annual budget. And we've been talking about this all along. We've been saying this ever since it became known that Trump alone, he demanded $6.2 million. Willis called the request for reimbursement of legal costs a vivid example of a punitive, senseless scheme created by the bill, which, according to her, leaves the taxpayers of Fulton County millions of dollars in debt.
That is, she immediately shifts this payment elsewhere, to the taxpayers.
Well, that's the $17 million question.
Well, that's a $17 million question. There are 13 defendants in this criminal case, including President Donald Trump. They claim that they have the right to reimbursement of expenses according to the new state law, which applies in cases when charges are dropped. That's why they submitted hundreds of pages of receipts to try to get their money back. Judge Scott McAfee will decide if they're entitled to it and how much they'll get.
In her statement, she claims that the district attorney does not intend to let the taxpayers of Fulton County pay such an absurd amount for such an equally absurd reason. Willis stated that the defendant's claims include the following: ridiculously expensive hotel stays and seafood dinners costing hundreds of dollars, So she is not only challenging the law that allows Trump and his people to claim funds, but she is also disputing the amount? Please.
The court has already reviewed Fani's request and rejected it. She was completely prohibited from interfering in the compensation for damages. This is certainly a blow to Fani, but for now, the hearings continue. There hasn't been a decision yet regarding the reimbursement of these expenses or the extent of it. And I'll say one thing. It's a shame that this amount isn't to be paid personally to Fani, to her lover. It would be very nice to watch how they would squirm, twist, and sweat, and turn each other in. But Fani still has a trial ahead because of that. That she coordinated her actions with the White House and with the January 6th investigation committee about the alleged Capitol storming. Fani had no right to act on the administration's orders. Here we have independent prosecutors. Independently, they are elected. People vote for them. They are independent. As you all understand, we all live in the same world. We are all dependent. That's why prosecutors are dependent, and everyone else is dependent too. They got Trump, someone who isn't dependent on anyone, and they're freaking out about it. Realizing that Trump has already become the 47th president, the Democrats started burning documents. I would put it this way. Damaging computers and stealing money on a scale never seen before. Not even the collapsing Roman Empire or Babylon experienced anything like this. Not even 100-year-old Egypt. What 100-year-old? 1,000-year-old Egypt. That's what they did right after the elections.
Just last Thursday, literally last Thursday, the Environmental Protection Agency allocated $1.6 billion to 84 new recipients as part of its grant program for environmental justice and community change. And now you see how they just throw money around left and right. That's wastefulness.
They were hastily creating new nonprofit organizations and companies and pouring money into them. They were throwing billions of dollars in there. Yes, that's right. Billions. I didn't make a mistake.
Now, y'all, did you know that your Stacey Abrams is still trying to get $2 billion that the Biden administration allocated for her and her colleagues? It was part of a larger package, $20 billion in appropriations that were allocated by Biden to various groups of climate activists.
This beautiful lady was given $2 billion, and that was part of the $20 billion package that the Democrats hurriedly put together. They transferred it to organizations that were engaged in promoting the dangers of global warming. This is Stacey Abrams, that's her name. She started a company by depositing $100 into the account and immediately received a transfer. Let's put it this way, $2 billion. $5 million to another company's account. Then they started transferring money there, then something else, and then the rest of the $2 billion. Trump slowed it down, or rather he froze it. But Stacey filed a lawsuit. She'll fight for that kind of money. She said she might win. Who knows with these judges? It's already been through the court, though, on appeal, on the way to appeal. That's it, God knows. If you know the judges, the work by the principle, our party is the best, the fastest, the strongest, and I depend on it. Or if the judge's daughter gets $500,000 every day, then Stacey will win. The Environmental Safety Department, if we have one, is responsible for research in the field of climate, weather, and the impact of human activity on the environment. And all sorts of foundations have appeared out of nowhere, now with crazy amounts of money.
As you remember, I brought up to this podium the fact that last summer the Environmental Protection Agency was going to allocate hundreds of millions of dollars to groups that I consider anti-American, against law enforcement, and pro-Palestinian on their websites. These are absolutely far-left groups. We don't even have an inspector general because the Democrats didn't allow it. They didn't include an inspector general in their bill to oversee the $41 billion allocated in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. And now you see how they're just throwing money away. That's wasteful spending. It's a waste. And they don't want to leave those funds there because they don't want us, first of all, to reprogram them. Or that's what we're most likely going to do. Return that money to more useful programs that make more sense. To different people all over the country. So recently, I requested that the Environmental Protection Agency provide us with transparency. I asked them to give us a report on how much was spent, who received those funds, and what criteria were used to determine those recipients. Those who are supposedly going to create these climate justice programs here at the end of the term, before the president leaves office.
Money was being taken from everyone. Unnecessary ones and necessary ones. America's programs were handed over to those who fought against Israel, who organized beating of Jews in universities, those who supported Hamas, those who fought against America with all their might. We have a wonderful organization called the Democratic Party of the United States of America. But if it is so corrupt, if it lies at every step, steals, supports Hamas, Iran, and Palestinian rights to their ancestral historical homeland, that was a joke. If at every step they rob those who actually make up the backbone of American society, those who create, those who build, those who defend the country, those who are called the makers. Well, how do these bastards get into power? Let's put it this way. Their critics say that they cheat in elections. Democrats say that if there is any cheating, it's very little and it doesn't affect anything. And people vote for us because we care and look after the people and the people care about us. Who is right? And Trump suggested, let's pass a law under which you can vote by presenting an ID. After all, only those who present an ID can vote anyway, and proof that you are a citizen, you have to present it, and then we will be sure that those who are supposed to vote are voting, U.S. citizens, and they vote only once, not 7 times each. And only if a person is seriously ill, disabled in the military or on a trip, then they receive an absentee ballot. I received one. Then the citizen will be able to vote by mail, but in any other case, in any other situation, he is required to appear at the polling station and vote in person. Before, everything was done in 1 day. Now they've stretched it out. I don't know how Trump feels about this. I think he'll want to go back to 1 day, or at most 2 days. Come and vote, show your ID, and then we'll settle this dispute once and for all. If it turns out there was a lot of fraud, and if it turns out there was a lot of fraud, that means it's different now. Then we did everything right. But for some reason, the Democrats, we know why, actually. They just went up in arms. No, and that's it. And why? Just because. Because Y is a crooked letter, as my aunt used to say. That means my father's younger sister. Maybe the people don't want it. Maybe Americans think it's bad. They show their ID when voting. You fly on airplanes, you have to show it. They won't let you on the plane otherwise. When you go to the bank and want to do something with your account, you have to show it. When you go to a notary, you have to show it. Recently in New York, when they were hiring snow removal workers, they required them to bring the same 2 IDs that Trump is demanding for voting. Why do snow removal workers have to show them, but when you're going to decide the future of the country, you don't have to show anything? What do people think about this? If they're white, right? Maybe black and Latino people think differently. Maybe all the Democrats are against it. Maybe women demand to stop showing them altogether. I don't look good in photos, so don't you dare. Who knows, right? Here's what the CNN poll showed.
Take a look here. Preference for photo ID at elections. 85% of white people support it. 82% of Latinos, 76% of African Americans support it. So here's the point. Voter ID is not controversial in this country. Photo ID for voting is not controversial in this country. It's not controversial along party lines, and it's not controversial along racial lines. The overwhelming majority of Americans agree with Nicki Minaj that, in fact, you should have a photo ID in order to be able to vote.
So the rapper Nicki Minaj said this. She said, "We want fair elections. We don't want cheating." But the leadership of the Democratic Party doesn't want to hear the voice of the people. The question is why?
The Democrat Congress people. Democratic congressmen are actively preventing this. And usually it would seem that if you are in Congress, you should represent the interests of your constituents. And if you think that they represent their constituents, then that would make you think that this is extremely unpopular among the left. For example, Democrats, their voters don't want voter ID. But here's what's strange. That's not true. The overwhelming majority of Americans on both sides agree that we should have safe and secure elections. The Democrats you hear in Congress act like this is controversial, but it's all just theater. The world is just a stage. In real life, in everyday America, these statements aren't controversial at all. We have to make sure that you really are who you say you are before you take part in a very important election. And every election is important. So you start to wonder, if the overwhelming majority of people agree with this, why are Democratic congressmen trying to stand in the way of their own people's will?
That's exactly what I'm asking. Why?
It's not good for the country. It's not good for the country when non-citizens or, well, I don't know, just someone off the street who says they're your grandmother but actually isn't. But they come and say, I promise I'll just sign that I am who I say I am. Or when there are ballot dumps, like during the COVID years. So many things can happen to change the election. I mean, look at the curious case of Joe Biden. Look at the curious case of Joe Biden. Sorry, that's right. Joe Biden was elected president of the United States of America in the safest and most secure election of all time, receiving 81 million votes, making him more popular than Barack Obama.
And what do the Democrats say about this? They probably make serious arguments in favor of letting anyone vote as many times as they want. Continued.
These guys say that the SAVE Act is needed so that illegal immigrants don't vote, but you all know that's not true.
The jury found a woman from Massachusetts guilty of election fraud. We're talking about a 59-year-old illegal immigrant who lived in the country for many years, stole someone else's personal information, and voted in the 2024 presidential election. Take a look at this photo. This is Lina Maria Arovio Hernandez. In this picture, you see Marta with an I voted sticker, which everyone gets when they go to vote.
That's how it is, Stephen. That's the way to do it.
It's just ridiculous. There are simply no words for this.
For Dubrovsky, well, there you go. Why do we have such idiots in Congress?
The left and the media are terrified that given his track record of success and a reliable electoral system, they may never win an election again. That's why you're seeing this hysteria. The anti-MAGA crowd kind of stays out of this. I think almost everyone agrees with the SAFE Act. Even many Democrats agree with the SAFE Act. Well, of course, requiring voters to show ID and making it law, that's definitely racism, guys, because that's what Chuck Schumer said. It's like a poll tax, man.
If you can't find a birth certificate or proper ID, you'll be discriminated against. It's mean and disgusting. And I told our Republican colleagues, this won't pass in the Senate. You won't get a single Democratic vote in the Senate. We're not going to bring back Jim Crow laws across the country. And when the American people hear what exactly this does and what its true purpose is, they'll be against it too.
How many times are we going to fall for this with corrupt hacks and lackeys in the media and on the Democratic side? How is it racist to ask people to show ID? That's what he means, right? If you draw an analogy with Jim Crow laws. So, white people have no problem getting an ID, finding a birth certificate, a driver's license, or another document not related to driving. White people, is it not a problem for people to do that?
This is Dan Bongino. And on his show, he played a speech by the main Democrat in the Senate, Chuck Schumer. And what did he say when he found out that 80% of the country wants people to show ID when voting?
You recently responded to President Trump's post on Truth Social about the SAVE Act, saying that if he doesn't sign bills until it's passed, the Senate will be at a complete standstill. Can you explain, isn't that a slap in the face to the American people, 85% of whose voters support voter ID?
Yes, but their law is not about identification.
First of all, it's about voter registration. This allows ICE to exclude tens of billions of people from the lists. And they are not informed about it until Election Day. And you come, and they tell you, you are no longer registered, you are not registered here, you are not on the lists. And they say, I didn't know that.
Well, he's just blatantly lying. Well, he's either making it up on the spot or they came up with this line in advance. Because, well, they know for sure that everyone wants them to vote and show ID. But it's interesting what he said, I didn't know that before. So, was he lying there? He didn't know that before. But if you didn't know something like that before, something that would make it absolutely necessary not to vote for it, then why did you resist even before you found out? And, so to speak, why did you call this law a racist project? Well, it's interesting that not so long ago, back when Schumer still had hair on his head and maybe even brains inside his skull, back then he was saying something completely different. And back then you could even call him a Trumpist.
All right, now to another top Democrat. Now let's talk about another high-ranking Democrat who has come under new scrutiny. A resurfaced video from the 90s shows Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer supporting ID checks to combat welfare fraud. Fast forward to today. He is fighting against voter ID requirements in federal elections.
Let's face the truth. Wherever people go, they're asked for their social security card. Basically, one of the ways to prove that you are a law-abiding person eligible to work is to show your driver's license and social security card.
It's terrible, what he's saying. It's terrible that you actually have to show two forms of identification. Otherwise it would be dishonest. I can show you dozens of videos of Democrats slurring their words, shouting that it's the end of democracy if people are forced to show ID at elections. I don't think any other country has something like that, right? So you can just come in and say, I'm like Joe Blow, or just say whatever, come here, I'll write down whatever I want, and I'll go vote. That's it. And the Democrats, by the way, say that making voters get a birth certificate or a photo ID if they've lost it is terribly difficult. A couple of days ago, I already told you I checked and gave you the numbers that you can get all the documents within 4 to 6 weeks, and it will cost about up to $150. It varies by state, up to $150. But if you don't have them, or if you're disabled, contact the local office of the party you're planning to vote for, and they will come to you, fill everything out, and pay for it. So all you'll need to do is sign the papers and let them take your photo. On a white background. That will be very difficult. It has to be done on a white background. They say a light background, right? So within the 2 years between elections, to find half an hour of free time, I think it's possible. What do you think? Is it difficult? Or is it impossible, as the Democrats claim? Or maybe those who can't do it shouldn't be allowed to vote and decide the fate of the country. Voting is not an obligation. It's a privilege. We fought for it and we keep fighting. We continue. And it wouldn't hurt to earn it. So what is Trump proposing? And where did it get stuck? The essence of the bill is as follows. All voters are required to present identification when voting. By mail only in case of illness, disability, or military deployment. Plus, the bill adds that men are not allowed in women's sports, women's restrooms, or showers, and gender reassignment surgeries for children are only allowed with the written consent of both parents. But actually, I would ban it altogether. I would ban it until a certain age, that's it. Period. The bill passed in the lower house. But in the Senate, the Republicans don't have 60 votes. But what can be done? The Republicans can eliminate what's called the filibuster for this bill. Again, I've already talked about this. Let me repeat. The filibuster is the minority's right to debate bills endlessly and prevent moving to a vote. To stop a filibuster, you need 51 votes, but senators don't like breaking the Senate's rules. And they almost never actually do it. For example, the Democrats eliminated the filibuster for confirming judges, But 2 years later, this allowed Trump to appoint whoever he wanted to the Supreme Court without regard for the Democrats. The Democrats started shouting, "Judges are one thing, but the Supreme Court is another." Nowhere did it say that this was just about regular judges. So Trump took advantage of what the Democrats had paved the way for, and now several Republicans believe that this should never be done under any circumstances, because in the future this will pave the way for all sorts of other bad things. Trump is putting pressure on the Republicans. He is demanding to abolish the filibuster. He calls this law fundamental for democracy in the country, and he announced that he will not sign any laws at all until a Senate-approved act is put on his desk. If the Republicans put this bill to a vote, even without having enough votes, then the Democrats will move on to an active filibuster. That's nonstop talking. Remember, there was a movie called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. That was the exact example shown as a positive example of it. And they will talk around the clock. There could be 47 of them talking. Let's say each of them talks for 10 hours. That's roughly 470 to 500 hours. That is 20 full days. But then they'll run out of steam because you can't do it a second time. He spoke once. That's it. Leave. The Republicans have to sit in the chamber all this time. And after 500 hours, well, 20 days. If the talking ends, they can vote and get 51 votes, including the vice president. You need, let's say, 50 senators for that. Right now, there are 52, I think. 53. Damn, I can't figure it out right now. Anyway, you need at least 50 senators plus the vice president, and then you can pass the law. Not 60 anymore, but with 51 votes. Then there will be court cases. But that's a different stage, and the president can start acting according to the law. Yes, the law can be overturned, of course, in the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court finds a violation of the Constitution, honestly, I don't know. I don't think there's any violation of the Constitution there.
But we don't have a country if our elections are as corrupt and unfair as we've seen recently. You know, for example, almost no one has a mail-in voting system like we do. Not in any other country in the world. France got rid of it. They all got rid of it. You know why? Because it's corruption. And Jimmy Carter, when he created the commission, honestly, I think that's probably the best thing he did. He said, you can't have mail-in voting because it's fundamentally unfair. And it turned out to be absolutely unfair. So we're going to fight for this.
Trump confirms that there are 4 or 5 Republicans who are blocking this law. So we do all this and put it to a vote. Boom. 4 or 5 people are not voting. And we need, so to speak, we can only afford to lose at most 2, maybe 3, but we can't afford to lose 4 or 5. So it's not so much because of the act itself, but because of the filibuster, the repeal of the filibuster. He says the country, Trump says, the country wants fair elections, and that's more important than Senate rules. So you're holding the country hostage. Trump is directly threatening these senators, actually, saying he'll primary them if they don't start acting in the people's interest. Well, there are a couple of senators who aren't up for re-election, so that won't really scare them. Now, the people, 85% of the people are demanding that this law be passed. And these people. By the way, Trump said that he will name the Republicans who are resisting. This is a disgrace to our nation. Maybe Trump will offer to add something very important for these senators to this bill. Or rather, well, to their state, so to speak. And they'll give in, because the state will start putting pressure, people in the state will start calling, and so on. Trump has a Senate majority for the bill, but he doesn't have a majority to break the filibuster. But Trump understands so well that this bill is truly a matter of life or death for democracy. Democracy, no matter how you feel about it, only exists when all votes are counted. And the votes that are counted are those of people who are allowed to vote. If 2 thieves accidentally break into your kitchen, they don't have the right to vote on how to divide the money that you, your husband, or your wife earned, right? So, well, what do you think? Will he be able to overcome the Republicans, Force them to abolish the filibuster, or will he break? Don't forget about the bell, please, ladies and gentlemen, and about subscribing. First subscribe, then hit the bell. It's useful for you and pleasant for us. That's all. Goodbye.